Welcome to this week's episode of Esports Wrap. I'm your host, Michael Amargon, and this week we're going to be talking about the Game of the Year awards. Now, of course, there are games out there that will take the overall spot, but then there are some slightly more technical awards that go out there from things like voice acting to uh, storytelling to the actual technicalities of the game to it even goes down to best game players and hosts and stuff like that for tournaments, so on and so forth. And so this year, I should say, this year is a little bit different than before, but they're pretty much carrying a tradition that the Game of the Year awards is continuing on. They've been having it for a few years now, and depending on where you look, there are different places that give their own quote unquote awards. But there's one main place that most of us know because they go by the name Game of the Year Awards. So we're going to be taking a look at what their picks are and what we think is actually going to win. And this might actually surprise you. Now, I know before the show, someone had suggested that one of the games was going to be Red Dead or Fortnite. And that's always one that's on the list, and I'm not going to say it's not. But at the same point, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to win. And we also have to keep in mind Fortnite is a little different within its own rights, just simply because of how it actually works. So let's see really quick. Great. Okay. So just trying to get this thing working here. Okay, so White Pancakes, I see you're inside the chat. You are Fanboy Night Battle Royale. Oh, wait, are you saying that it's fanboyish? Or, because if I remember correctly, inside the WhatsApp group, you were saying you would probably do something if Fortnite was actually showing up again. I will say, for their picks, Fortnite is not there. Nor is it on Google Play's Game of the Year. Google Play's one is actually PUBG, which is kind of interesting. But that's probably due to the fact that Fortnite is not on Google Play. And so probably the one that's rated the highest is one that is, and so that's going to be PUBG. But that's not the Game Awards. The Game Awards quite literally has it so where we see that there are, let me pull up their own. We have, for Game of the Year, Assassin's Creed, Celeste, God of War, Marvel's Spider-Man, Monster Hunter World, and Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, there are some good picks inside here. I'm not going to deny it, but for a lot of people, it's actually been narrowed down a lot more than that. It's to the point where I dare say most people are actually considering it just being one particular game that's actually going to win this. And that game is going to be God of War. If I use one of my co-hosts references, now this is Chris. Now I'm gonna read his thoughts on his personal pick for Game of the Year, and that would be God of War. Seamless gameplay with no loading screen, redefined the entire franchise from action-oriented to story or character-focused. Best story for the year, which he admits is subjective. It has challenging content while remaining very accessible to casual players. Excellent voice acting. And he has striked out Kratos renaming Atreus Boy, which had its own set of memes saying, boy. Looks graphically better than every other game out there on the console market. And he's saying to the point that you can clearly see and count Kratos's pores outside of cinematics. Speaking of cinematics, seamless transition of cinematics to game due to the gameplay graphics being cinematic level quality all the dang time. Near movie-like experience, replayable despite being a hybrid corridor-style open world. Remade an entire franchise with minimal retcons. And I want to take a pause right there. Mainly for the fact that... Oh, wait, hold on. Do we have an issue? Fact that... Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, apparently we don't. I don't know what's going on. Anyway. So what's happening is, let's use that as an example and move forward. So we already have something that is on the tier with Breath of the Wild, which won Game of the Year last year. Now, we have something like that inside God of War. Sadie's 81, thank you for following. Now, here's the thing, guys. Like I'm saying, this is pretty much Breath of the Wild quality type gameplay. Now, the actual graphics, of course, is going to be better because it's not using polygons and it's not using more of that Switch type effect where the colors are very switchy. Like, most games on the Switch have a particular kind of palette. They're rendered a certain kind of way. With the PS4, PC, Xbox, admittedly, you can typically get much better graphics on these things. But you're not really going to be arguing about that because of how they render and the kind of development that actually went into them for the graphics. The reason why I mentioned all of that is to say that when you take a look at something that's going to be on the PS4 and you bring in the dynamics and open worlds and the storytelling that is in God of War, you then have to take that and compare every other game to that. And it kind of gets a little unfair to a certain degree. Mainly to the point that, you know, how should I put this? You just have to keep it fair. Now, let me get back to the awards. Like I mentioned, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is a great game from what I've seen so far. I've bought it, downloaded, played it a little bit, both on Project Stream from Google and the game itself. And while I haven't gotten far with it, it takes pretty much the Assassin's Creed that we all know and love, add on the Origins dynamics and elements to it, and then takes it all one step further. Now, that was something that I'd heard from multiple different people. Chris being one, who is my co-host, like I mentioned, inside our Discord chat from one of our users, Matrix, and a number of other sources. Like, what they've done is just simply, it makes it a rival to a degree, because there are still flaws within the Assassin's Creed thing. Essentially, you're still doing everything that you've already done previously for the same game. It's not really that game changing. They've added some extra tweaks, they've added some extra story, they've improved the graphics. God of War, though, comparatively to what it was before, has improved by leaps and bounds. And that still it's not quite the same because you're looking for a game of the year, but at the same point, the sheer quality of it comes into play. And admittedly, when you take a look at the graphics of God of War versus the graphics of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I would have to say God of War still comes up on top. Story wise, both of them are very in depth. Game open worldness, it's equal for both of them in my opinion. Just simply because of how much you can actually just roam around, not ever see really a loading screen unless you're doing one of the missions. And that's where Odyssey starts to take a hit. Because anytime you want to load in to do a mission, or just like you have to change areas based on whatever it is, you essentially have to go through this resyncing loading screen. So that's already a hit. But overall, Assassin's Creed is a great game, but is a game of the year ready? I don't think so. The next up that they have on the list is a game called Celeste, which admittedly is a really, really nice game. And it takes old school Mario and amps it up to make it a fast paced platformer. And let me show you an example of what I mean exactly. I'm going to play the trailer for this game. And I want you guys to tell me what you think. I'm not going to do it with the sound because I don't want like any issues to come about with copyright. But this is essentially the game right here. Yeah, pretty much Celeste is a 2018 Cuphead. And Cuphead is an awesome game. But my favorite part of Celeste, quite literally, is when you start to get to the bosses and to things starting to try and chase you down. Like, this part is cool and whatnot. You can see where it becomes fast paced, and it has different elements to it that make it unique in a sense. And this is around the part right here inside the trailer that things start to change. And you start to see elements almost from like those other 8-bit games that you would have seen from back in the day, like Chrono Trigger, so on and so forth. Like just the elements of them showing up a little bit here and there, a little bit of like Mega Man, a little bit of Sonic, that kind of stuff. And like I said, admittedly, the game plays well. It has a good dynamic. Is it Game of the Year though? It's admittedly just it's just a platformer. The storyline is okay. And while I would say the music for it helps it dramatically, a lot of these games that are on this list have awesome music as well. So that one's a little. I still can't give it a Game of the Year. We've already gone over God of War, and my personal thoughts on it is that from what I've seen, from what I've read, from what I've watched, this is a game that gives you multiple layers of depth. And white pancakes, you're right. Platformers pretty much never really win because there's only a certain amount of depth that you can actually add onto these things. And admittedly, while there are Mario games on this list, none of them's a platformer. We'll get to those in a little bit though. So, going back to God of War, when we actually start to take a look, from anywhere from playing the easy mode to the really, really hard modes, then the challenge difficulty is always being upped. Which I mean is the entire point of these challenge modes. They're there to make it harder for you. And that's one of the things that I loved about certain games that came out this year. The next one is actually an example of that, which is Marvel's Spider-Man. Granted, from what I'm hearing, the harder levels aren't as hard as people make it out to seem, but they still offered an interesting challenge. Speaking of Mario Odyssey, where is Mario? It's actually not on this list, which is a little surprising. I will admit, I'm a little confused. We have other Mario titles, like I mentioned, but no Odyssey. Let me just double confirm this. When did Mario Odyssey come out? That's the reason why Mario Odyssey came out October 27th, 2017. So it had to and was rivaled by Breath of the Wild, which admittedly is a superior game in a lot of different aspects. While Mario Odyssey was, of course, fun, not many things back then could have really fight Breath of the Wild. Not a lot of things, even now, could really fight Breath of the Wild. But Marvel's Spider-Man brought back to life a really enjoyable storyline for a beloved character. The gameplay was awesome. While it did have travel and loading screens, they were interesting. And granted, they were interesting for the first few times you saw them, and after a while, you just kind of stopped watching or paying attention when you're traveling in the subway, and because this was only like 3 different cutscenes that they had. Either you are listening to music, you're talking to someone who's in a spider costume, or you're doing something else. And that was all your cutscenes. Like, there wasn't anything really special else happening in the subway. But the storyline that kept developing with Marvel Spider-Man was a really good one. I enjoyed it. And the fact that there are DLCs that keep coming out, adding more content, more story, more gameplay, make it, in my opinion, a top contender. And I'm glad to say that some of my co-hosts agree. At least with it being a good runner-up to God of War. Though one game came so close earlier on in 2018, and a lot of people thought this was going to be it. This was going to be Game of the Year, and that was Monster Hunter World. And there were some flaws with it. Connectivity issues, for starters. The fact that it took forever to actually switch over to PC. It took literally months, and so you couldn't really do anything with that if you didn't have a PS4. But the graphics in the game, the gameplay, the actual combinations, the fighting styles, the maps that they had, and the monster interactions, the fact that they actually had a little bit of AI tunes into that, and based on where you are, what you're doing, it's actually, the monsters are actually reacting to you just a little bit based off of that. Like, when you determine when you're about to swing, things start to move a little differently based off of that. So it had a lot of depth when you looked at the actual programming of the game. And while after a while you would have already gotten all the sets that you wanted, they started adding some DLC, but it wasn't, I dare say, quality DLC. Like, sure, you can get gold armor from one of the bosses that they brought out for a seasonal, and then other things that came out seasonally for the different seasons, the spring, winter, fall, summer, that kind of thing. They're bringing out content for that, but at the same time, for the most part, what they're doing is just bringing back a lot of the same old events that you would have missed out on. And there's not a whole lot of new content out there, which is sad, because a lot of people were hoping that they'd get continuous play like for years on from when they saw the first spring event happen, and then the next spring event, and then the next event happened, and it was pretty much the same events, and then the next one happened, and it's the same events, and it's like, yeah, I'm not really feeling this anymore. Like, this is boring. Like, I've already got a pretty good set. I don't necessarily need to be highest rank. I'm able to fight everything that's out there. Uh, Chilogen is saying that single players have basically died. And I don't know, because you have to keep in mind that so far, what we've already ranked as the first place and second place within our minds is God of War, which is a single player game, and Spider-Man, which is a single player game. And then we take a look at Red Dead Redemption 2, which recently brought out their online beta, which we're going to get into that in a different episode. But if we take a look at the single player game, the storyline inside of that is actually pretty good up to a point. And that's kind of where it starts to go downhill. Because a lot of people say that after chapter 5, it kind of felt like they had a change of heart while developing the story and the game. And things just kind of started to go downhill. Like just became more of the same, whereas everything up to chapter 5 was something different, something riveting, some new information, some new gameplay, something, different than just a regular shooter. And then it kind of changed after that, and so people got bored of it. And so while the storyline's great and single player for it quite literally you can spend hours just fishing, hunting, or whatnot, and it can be quite enjoyable and relaxing. Like I mentioned back when we actually talked about the original Red Dead. Well, when we talked about Red Dead 2 when it first came out, it's only for a certain period of time that you can do that, and after a while, it just becomes monotonous. And that's the sad thing about it, in my opinion. So personally speaking, I wouldn't give Red Dead Redemption to a tier 1 or tier 2. Now, White Pancakes is saying single players are stronger than ever and multiplayers are dying. And so, and multiplayer games are too grindy. And, I'm finding it where it's an interesting thing, because sometimes I find that single player games are actually becoming too grindy as well. Case in point, what I just finished saying about Red Dead Redemption 2. After that chapter 5, then we just kind of started to get grindy. Like the gameplay was grindy. So I don't know, guys. Like that one's a weird one. We need new game companies. While there are always indie games out there, it's just indie games have a harder time actually finding their way into lists like these and people actually playing it and talking about it. Like Cuphead probably found it pretty hard just to find itself where it is. Like it had to have a stroke of luck for that, for people to find it, pick up on it, and say, "Hey, this actually has a pretty good storyline. Like I'm actually enjoying this gameplay." So it's a little bit more than that. So overall, I personally would actually have to agree with some of my co-hosts and say God of War. I know that's the pick for Chris. That's the pick for Dwan. I'm gonna have to put that one as mine as well. Spider-Man being my second one. I think Chris picked that as a second. I'm not sure what Dwan picked. But I really wish Monster Hunter World had done better, so I could give that my second pick, personally speaking. Now, then we get into best ongoing game. And this one is one that annoys me because it has Destiny 2 inside of it. And Destiny 2 had the means to become a great game. Don't get me wrong. It's just, and Yes, I hear when people say, "Oh, this expansion makes it better," and I thought that too when the first two expansions came out, and then the third one, and then there's the new one, and then the add on to that, and it's like, I don't care anymore. I don't care for Destiny 2 anymore. It has failed me enough. It's kind of like a bad relationship at this point. Essentially, yeah, they pulled a fast one making it free. Um, like Destiny 2 Forsaken, the thing that brought a lot of people back was Cade dying. And after they finished with that and like avenging Cade, it's kind of like back to more of the same. So, yeah, nah, I'm not gonna give it to Destiny 2. Unfortunately, White Pancakes, Fortnite is inside this one, and admittedly, I kind of have to give it to them. Like so far, I would have to say this is actually my number one because of just how much they've continuously updated their story. The gameplay hasn't changed much. Actually, that's not even true. They continuously improve the story play so that, for example, they have the situation. Say, why is Fortnite in it? Hear me out, guys. Hear me out. They continuously change up the gameplay wherein they can even re-change the entire map. For example, they had an entire lake that had you that typically was one of the spots where people could snipe you if you're trying to swim through it because it slows you down. They then changed it because of a giant cube that fell into it and made the entire thing bouncy. Then changed the cube so that it evolved and made it into that same area, becoming a tornado based kind of thing. And like then it there has been so much story inside the multiplayer version of this game that outrivals the story part of this game. That is insane. And then you take it, and the fact that they keep adding in different weapons, different mechanics, they added in flipping golf carts so that you can get across the map faster. They've added in guided missiles that you can jump on and actually ride around. They've added in trampolines. They've added in grenades. They've added in so much stuff inside this game, and they continuously do it season after season after season. It's hard not to give it to them as an ongoing developed game. This is a living game, whether you want to admit it or not. Fortnite is, and it's hard to see otherwise. And yeah, Chillagen saying Epic can do anything with their engine, they're gods with it. Change the stage like no tomorrow. And then you've got things like No Man's Sky, which took forever to actually catch on. Quite literally, when that came out, people played it for like a little bit and said this is trash. And then they did some updates almost like a few months later, and finally the game's playable. And I've seen some of my friends play it, and like my stream friends, I should say, play it. My Pancakes is saying that my hate isn't for Fortnite. Epic Games is just amazing. I was a Paragon fanboy and I hate Battle Royale. Fair enough. Fair enough. Battle Royales pretty much going everywhere nowadays, and I can get where you're annoyed by it. But then we have another Battle Royale, which is kind of like a first person MOBA, which is Overwatch, which is also on this list, which kind of surprises me. But at the same point, it's also still inside the living world aspect of it because they keep adding characters every once in a while. They keep adding a few maps every here and there, and they keep doing optimizations to the characters to make them viable for competitive. That's probably the reason why Overwatch is in here. Unfortunately, Chillagen, you're right. Overwatch is still a little bit too unbalanced, and there's still not enough changes for me to warrant it actually being voted as Game of the Year for best ongoing game, I should say. And the last one for it is Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, which came out not so long ago, but at the same point, it's a good game, but it's not as popular as other ones. It hasn't seen as much development. It hasn't seen as many changes. It's not as I dare say it hasn't seen as many updates as and actually changes as Destiny 2. And Destiny 2 is outrivaled by Fortnite, in my opinion. Or would you like to challenge that, Chilogen? Granted, the game could be good, but remember the category. The category quite literally is best ongoing game. Rainbow Six Siege will never die until like the next one comes out, but at the same point, how should I put this? It is continuously more of the same, in my opinion. It has great mechanics. It doesn't really have a story. Like you have some story, but it's not like big. And the main reason why people play it is for the multiplayer, which has no story. You're just taking over maps. And compare that to Fortnite, what I've already said with that, guys. Like, really? Would you say Siege versus Fortnite in terms of story, gameplay, mechanic changes, and all of that kind of stuff? Children saying, check this out. Siege is in top 5 in Steam, and what is that? 100,000k players. I'm gonna guess that's 100,000 players in 24 hours. And yes, that's great. But at the same point, we quite literally have the most played game in the world on here, which is not on Steam, so you can't actually like qualify it. So I don't know, guys. Like I'm gonna have to give it to Fortnite. They've just continuously upped the ante every season, and even if it's just with skins and stuff like that, they bounce their game really well. When they see changes happening that are just starting to really break it, they switch it out next season and they archive it. And then if they decide to bring it back, they make some tweaks and make it better. So yeah, you hate to give it, but they do it well. So honestly, guys, I have to keep it to Fortnite. I have to. Then they give it best game direction. And the first game they have on here is A Way Out, which admittedly Chris and I played for a little bit, and it has some really interesting mechanics behind it. And even when it was first announced back in E3 last year, it made people wonder, because technically you have to have another person to play it, and you guys have to work together. There are quite literally scenes in this where if you don't work together, you can fall to your death, you can get trapped, you can get caught, you can get killed, and you have to start it all over from the last checkpoint. And that gets annoying. When you keep failing. But the part of it, the whole thing of it is team building. And that was something that no one else has really ever focused in on a game like this. Sure, there are things that you need someone else to maybe help you with, but there's never been a game that you require two people just to play it. At least none that come to my mind. And the story for it is actually pretty good. The graphics for it are nice. I would say this is so far my top pick or contender. But then comes, right after that, Detroit Become Human, which has an amazing storyline, amazing graphics, and the choices that it makes you make change the dynamics of the game so vastly that Detroit way bypasses A Way Out, in my opinion. So that one becomes my pick for best game direction of the year. We follow that with God of War, which has done an amazing job, but at the same point, I'm not so sure it really bypasses Detroit Becomes Human in that aspect. It's a great game overall, but when you take a look at what all's happened and what happens, and the choices and stuff like that that can really happen with Detroit, I it's a little conflicted, but I kind of feel like I still should give it to Detroit. Then you have Marvel's Spider-Man, which admittedly the game direction for it went really well. But at the same point, there's not a whole lot of choices to make. The gameplay is pretty static. You find someone, you beat them up, you maybe save someone, and so you kind of continue with that. So I can't really give it to them either. Red Dead Redemption 2's single player storyline, though, that does introduce some moral dilemmas into it. And I do like how should I put this? I do like some of the choices that they made when actually developing this game. However, I still like the depth of Detroit Becomes Human a bit more than Red Dead. And I'm sad to say that because I actually do enjoy Red Dead. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. I was hoping Red Dead would have produced more for this game than what's actually happened. And White Pancake says Quantic Dreams is too good at storytelling, and Chilogen brings up the point that, well, it's made by the same people who made Detroit Becomes Human, and yeah, in terms of direction, I'm gonna have to give it to Detroit. Then we get to Best Narrative. And the first one out of the bat is Detroit Becomes Human. And this here now becomes a battle for me because God of War is also still on this list. And God of War's narrative was amazing. The fact of the father-son experience and what's happening, the storytelling and everything like that with God of War, like this one, it's a little bit of a tie for me. I'm actually not sure who I can pick. It's either going to be God of War or Detroit Becomes Human for me so far. On this list, though, we also have a Life is Strange 2 Episode 1 and Marvel's Spider-Man, along with Red Dead Redemption 2. I can still say that I would probably still give it to Detroit Becomes Human or God of War. And in terms of narrative, now don't get me wrong. Again, I really like Spider-Man's narrative because it was funny, it was quippy, and that's Spider-Man. Like, it kept things close to home. It made me laugh at several points. It made me really like go into the game and actually say, yeah, this is actually how Spider-Man would react to this kind of situation. And so this is a little weird. And like I mentioned, Red Dead Redemption 2's narrative does pretty well, but at the same point, certain things just become annoying after a while. And so the narrative then becomes a little spoiled. Because you get annoyed at certain characters because of how stupidly they are acting. And they could have been written better. And sometimes they couldn't. But at the same point, I just can't give it to Red Dead. Like, I believe that they could have handled certain things better with character development inside that game. They did an amazing job, but I still think there was room for improvement when you compare it to something like Detroit or God of War. And Life is Strange 2, well, admittedly, much like you, Pancakes, I haven't really played much with it. So I can't really speak for it. And the fact that I haven't really heard anything about it too much kind of speaks its own volumes. It's Ha! It speaks its own narrative. There you go. Then we get into best art direction. And we have on this list Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which has some really good graphics. But it's not the best. Like, I can look at these characters and I can still see flaws in the characters, like compared to other games that I've played, other games that I've seen. God of War, for example, which is the next one on this list, actually has some amazing graphics, like Chris mentioned earlier on inside this. And I have to give it to him. Like, so far, God of War is looking like it's the best art. Then we have Octopath Traveler, which is a pretty well-known game at this point, but it's not well-known. How should I put this? The graphics for the game are good, but it's still a Nintendo kind of game, and it's almost like a slightly 2.5D Chrono Trigger, if I could put it that way. Which of course was a great game back in its time, but at the same point, like when you're comparing yourself with something like God of War, it kind of falls a little bit short. You have then Red Dead Redemption 2 back on this list, and while the graphics are great and the scenery is nice, there are, I don't know, graphic wise, I still kind of have to give it to God of War just by a little bit, just because of the amount of detail that they put into it. Red Dead has some great detail as well, and when it comes to the main character, you can quite literally see a lot of the stuff behind it. But I don't know, it actually, you know what, I'm going to give it a tie between God of War and Red Dead in terms of art. If it came to more fantasy type of art, then I'd have to give it to God of War. And I don't think sorry, White Pancakes, I don't think Odyssey wins this one. Like I mentioned, the graphic quality is good, but it's not great. It's not amazing like God of War, or I would say even Red Dead. If you take a look at the characters here in Red Dead and take a look at it in Odyssey, Red Dead beats it. Now, yeah, sure, when it comes to modeling Rome and like other places like that, sure, but at the same point, when you take a look at buildings, then God of War has a pretty down pack for the most part. Red Dead really puts a lot of detail into their stuff, and while it's the sheer vastness of the detail, I would say is more Odyssey's thing. They, because of how vast it is, they have to dumb down some of the quality. So that's kind of where it falls in. Now, Red Dead and God of War handle both character visuals and environment visuals very well, while AC kind of has to, because of like how much it's trying to show off, it can't. So that's the reason why I can't see myself giving Odyssey game of the year for this particular branch. Yeah, exactly what Chillagen's saying. So in that aspect, yeah. Now, if you want to go into Red Dead Online, the character creation of that sucks donkey butt. But the environment's the same, so it still works. But if you take a look at the single player game, just because they were able to focus on particular characters, they made the quality for those characters amazingly well. And so, yeah, I have to leave it to those two so far. The next one was Return of the Obra Dinn, which was an interesting game. It's mainly like black. It's I can't really call it black and white, but it had its own artistic flair. I could say that much. So I guess that's why it's here. But I wouldn't put it that high up in my personal opinion. Yeah, I say that game is garbage. Why Pancake saying is God of War is mad. I was too willing to even look at their. Well, then that's kind of the point of God of War. Like you're there to create war, to kill stuff. But if you stopped and you took a look around, the environment is breathtaking. I don't know how else to put it. And the reason why it's there is more than likely because it's because of how different it is. It's going more of this uh noir type and design. But then again, there were quite literally shooters where everyone is pretty much blind, and if you take a step, then it uses echolocation, and then that's how you find the other players essentially to shoot them. That I think would be an interesting art design one. Far Cry 5 is on this list. Um but it's not on here so far. When it comes to we're going into the next one, which is best score in music, which is apparently presented by Spotify. We have Celeste, which we kind of already talked about, and I mentioned the music for it was really nice. We have God of War, which had some nice music as well. Marvel's Spider-Man, which had some music that was interesting, but I wouldn't really give it a win for this one. You have Ni no Kuni 2 with Revenant Kingdom. Uh, I'm wait. I'm really not too aware of this one. I can't really say that. We have Octopath Traveler again, which had some nice music. And then Red Dead Redemption 2, which is more of that nuanced ambient type of western music that you would expect from like a cowboy film, or some for the most part, no music at all. Um I'm Kingdom Hearts is yet to come out, Chilligen. Like we can talk about that when that comes out in 2019. I'm actually gonna have to give it between Celeste and God of War for music, in my personal opinion. I know White Pancakes, you're saying God of War, and I'm going to again say that Kingdom Hearts is not on this list. So please, it doesn't qualify, guys. It does not qualify. No, Neo Kuni, from what I've understood about it and from what I've heard from the music, it's not bad, but it's no God of War and it's no Celeste. In my opinion, at least. Oh my gosh, Chillagen is singing the song, the theme song, in chat. Okay. While he's doing that, we then have Best Audio Design, which is presented by Dolby. We have Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Forza Horizon 4, God of War, Marvel Spider-Man, Red Dead Redemption 2. In terms of audio design, it's a little hard because of how well they've done it with Call of Duty in terms of surround sound and whatnot. But at the same point, I kind of want to give it to God of War, but I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I'm looking at Forza here, and it's like Forza has almost always had good audio design, and yeah, I'm probably gonna say Forza Horizon 4, guys, with this one as my vote. When it comes to best performance, awarded to individual for voiceover acting, motion, and/or performance capture, we have Brian Descartes as Connor in Detroit Becomes Human, which he did a pretty good job for the role that he played. I'm not gonna lie. Then we have Christopher Judge as Kratos in God of War. I don't know why I keep calling him Kratos. Who has done an amazing job for God of War. Though I will admit, him consistently using the term boy annoys me for some reason. And so, like, I want to do that against him. We have Masalaneth Mahot as Cassandra for Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And she does a pretty dang bang on job when it comes to her voice acting. Whether she goes up against Kratos, I don't know. That one's a tough one for me. Because while Kratos doesn't have a whole lot of depth and emotion into it, when you really listen in, it does. If that makes any sense at all. Like, you can tell when something's painting him. And that's very weird because it's a more monotone type of voice. But you can still feel the pain that comes through with it. And so I think he did a really good job with that. Whereas you have Cassandra, who's just, as she's feeling it, she's letting you hear it. And so it just flows. And so maybe I may give it to her instead of Kratos. But I don't know. That one's still a little weird for me. Then we have Roger Clark as Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2, which, you know, he was okay. The voice acting for it was good. He did a good job. Would he be better comparatively to Cassandra, though? I don't think so. And then we have Yuri Lowenthal as Peter Parker, Marvel's Spider-Man. And this one is hard because it sounds like Peter Parker. It makes quips as Peter Parker, and it makes you feel like it's Peter Parker. Like it makes you feel like it's Spider-Man. His voice fills that role for me. And so it leaves me with a hard choice, and I'm not sure. This one's gonna be controversial, but I kind of want to let my feelings go with this one and say Peter Parker. Thank you for following Badir Vanos. Let me know if I said that correctly or not. By the way, welcome to the stream. Hey, we got someone else saying agreeing to Peter Parker for voice acting. That's great. And I got the name right. Now, with the next category that we have for the Game Awards, say pineapple pizza. Only when people aren't watching, then I might try it. Still, jokes better than all the other Spider. But I mean, Peter Parker is based off of stale, quippy, sometimes really bad pun jokes. Like that's the character. So the fact that he's and the quality of it. I mean, granted, that goes to more as the writers than anything, but he pulls them off well. So yeah, I still have to give it to Peter Parker. The next category is games for impact, which, you know, they're supposed to be thought-provoking, profound, pro-social meaning, or message. And the first one is one that admittedly I haven't heard about. It's 11/11 Memories Retold. White Pancakes wants to fight my new follower, Battier, for because he doesn't agree with pineapple on pizza. Say, why not put why not put apples? Hey, you may actually start a trend then, children. You never know. It might actually taste nice. I mean, they have candied apples and everything like that, you know. You never know. But yeah, 11/11 memories retold. While I get the feeling of that this is a pretty like heartfelt game, the fact that I haven't really heard about it too much is kind of a bad thing. And the thing about it is, it's made by Bandai, in a sense. DigiStar's Aardman Animations and Bandai Namco Entertainment, and it has a 8 out of 10 star rating on Steam, but granted, it's only got 25 reviews. So, yeah, that's not really the best idea. Then you've got Celeste, which, I mean, it has an interesting story. It is essentially saying, proving that you can accomplish anything. Florence, I have actually not really played it, but apparently it's an interactive story about love and life. Then you've got Life is Strange 2, Episode 1, and then The Missing, JJ Macfield, and the Island of Memories. Because Celeste is the only game that I've actually heard of from this list, I'm kind of leaning more to giving it to Celeste than anything else. Which is a shame, because these other games might actually be better than it when it comes to that heartfelt, wrenching, or telling us like a purpose-filled story behind it. So like you learn something and it helps improve you as a person. I just simply don't know. But when we come to best independent game, and this is where the indie games come in, White Pancakes, we have Celeste, we have Dead Cells, which is an interesting game within its own right, and it's more of how should I put this? It has let me read the definition of the game for you. It is a roguelike Metroidvania video game developed and published by Melvin Twin. Now, when you actually go on Steam, oh, by the way, they say it's some Souls-light elements to it. You grew up with the roguelikes, witnessed the rise of the roguelikes, and even the birth of the roguelite lights. And that first sentence is kind of like, what? We'd like to now present for you the consideration of Roguevania, the illegitimate child of Rogue Elite, Rogue Legacy, Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, Spelunky, etc., and an old school Metroidvania, Castlevania's STON and its ilk. Yeah, it seems like it's an interesting platformer game, so it kind of goes against Celeste in that aspect, but at the same point, and don't get me wrong, this game has some great reviews. It's 9 out of 10, and it has over 25,000 reviews on Steam. But I don't know, the fact that I've heard of Celeste and I haven't heard of Dead Cells too much, as much as I have heard of Celeste, that's not necessarily a good thing for best indie game, in my opinion. And of course, you guys are free to, give me your own opinion. Considering that Celeste only has a 10 out of 10, but it's only got almost like 4.7 thousand games. Okay, so Chiligen saying Dead Cells is quality, but compare that to Celeste. And that's what we pretty much have to do. We cannot rate them just by themselves. We have to rate them based on the other games that are in the the running, essentially. I do like the smoothness of the character design for Dead Cells versus Celeste. I will not deny that. In terms of best quality, though, well, the best indie game, this is essentially the next game of the year, but not for a AAA company. This is for an individual developer. So this becomes game of the year for indies. So which one would you say is game of the year, essentially? We have Into the Breach, which is an interesting one. It's almost more or less another one of those end of the world type games. Um, which this one's actually a really good one as well, 9 out of 10, and has close to a little bit over 4,000 reviews as well. And the gameplay for it is interesting. It's more of a uh turn by turn in a sense. So that's an interesting point of view for it. We we have Return of the Obra Dinn again. I'm already crossing that one off, personally speaking. And we have The Messenger, which has some really interesting character designs. I'm not gonna lie, but I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like they could have put a little bit more effort into the game and made it a little better than a mix between Chrono Trigger and Terraria in design. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like the backgrounds and like the story and stuff remind me of Terraria. Like, it's not the best. Terraria is a great game, uh, but the quality in it's kind of crap when you take a look at actual like graphics for a day and age. It's great as an 8-bit type of game, and this is not really 8-bit. Like, this is more 1632-bit from the way how they're trying to make it look. And I don't know. I don't know. I probably would have to give it to between Celeste and Dead Cells, in my personal opinion. When it comes to best mobile game, guess what's also on this list, guys? That's right, Florence. You thought I was gonna say Fortnite. Actually, yeah, Fortnite is of course on this list as well, guys. So guess who's probably gonna end up getting it? On this list, we of course have Donut County, which I mean is an interesting looking game, though. I mean, when you first hear it, you pretty much just think it's another game that you're going through and you're just cooking stuff and you know stuff like that, which it's not really based on, but it's its own little interesting story. Florence is on it, and mobile does not necessarily have to be garbage white pancakes. Come on. Uh, I probably will give Florence a chance after this, sometime throughout the week. When it comes to how it plays on mobile and stuff, whatnot. Fortnite and PUBG are both on it. PUBG has had issues from inception. I'm not going to give it top one just simply because of how poor it's actually been. Um, and Fortnite, the quality of the game is there. The playability of the game is a little harder though, and that's been something that's been the case since inception when it came ported over to mobile. People found it a little bit harder to actually play um, when it came to moving around and switching between stuff and so on and so forth. And I agree, PUBG took way too long to actually get over on this side of the world with their mobile game. They were in China for the longest time. I think it was either China or Korea, one of the two, for the longest time, and They even split off like two different versions of the game. One was one was sea, and one was land. And they had it playing like that, and then it finally moved over here to just the basic PUBG, and it's kind of like, yeah, but like the quality is still pretty crap because PUBG's graphics were always an issue. The fact that you can I wonder if they've actually ever fixed the issue where if you turn down your graphics, you can see through the grass and see people hiding in the grass. But yeah, PUBG. You guys were here longer, but I mean, you guys have had so much time to fix stuff, and you just didn't. That Fortnite kind of has to take lead, though we do have Reigns, Game of Thrones here as well, and Reigns, Game of Thrones, uh, is interesting. It's not just on mobile; it's on Steam and stuff like that too, where you can get it. It's got like 300 ratings or something like that for like $10. Sorry, not $10. $4, and has a 9 out of 10 rating. That's what I got confused about. If you take a look on the Play Store, it's got a 5-star rating from over 7,000 something people. And I mean, from the looks of it, it seems like it's an interesting game. It doesn't really seem like it's like Fallout Shelter though. Like it's Okay, so let me see if I can get this on YouTube so I can show you guys. Wait. Stop. Okay. So and here is I'm going to turn off the sound for this as well. Game of Thrones, the animated trailer, Reigns. It seems more card based than anything, which is kind of weird. Yeah, the click, that's from me switching from the Switch game earlier. So, yeah, this essentially seems to be more of a card based turn by turn. I shouldn't say turn by turn, but more of a card based game that's not really like Fallout Shelter. It's not really an action based game. It's not really anything like what I've really seen before, which can make it interesting in its own right. But would I give it best mobile game? Nah, sorry. So that said, Fortnite looks like it's coming out on top for best mobile game. And PUBG, like I mentioned way earlier on in the show, is actually Google Play's top mobile game. But that's simply because, well, Fortnite isn't on Google Play, in my opinion. So there are esports teams from mobile MOBAs. Yeah, you're right. There are. And you have Vainglory, for example. And what was the other one? Path of Glory? No. Lord, why is it not coming to mind? Arena of Valor, that's what it is. Path of Glory is the Chinese version of it. But yeah, then we have best VR and AR games. Oh yeah, Mobile Legends, you're right. You're right. But we've got then best VR and AR games. And Interestingly, we have Astrobot Rescue Mission, which is a PS4 game. We have Beat Saber, which White Pancakes is already saying wins, and in my opinion, I probably believe it will win as well. Um, the sheer hype that has always been behind this game. I mean, you're slashing stuff with a lightsaber, guys. Like, this has been the dream essentially for years. The hype that's been behind this game, it kind of just continues, and the complexity that they sometimes have these people going. It quite literally is Guitar Hero with you waving your arms and slashing stuff. And we all know how much we loved Guitar Hero back in the day. We have Firewall Zero Hour, which is an interesting shooter one, but it wasn't really the best. We have Moss, which was cute and fun in its own right, but still doesn't beat Lightsaber in my opinion. Well, Beat Saber. And Tetris Effect, which is interesting. Like, Tetris Effect is a different way to play Tetris, which has always been an interesting video game, and one that's been very competitive in the past, and how should I put this? Very mentally challenging. Now you're adding in the complexity of having a Decatron, which is, I think, the highest complexity that you can actually get with, like, I think it was either 14 or 16 lines cleared at once, which is vastly more than what you've got in the original Tetris. Makes the game a lot more complex and interesting. Plus the fact that you can play the game in regular mode and also in VR mode, which, from what it seems like, when someone had a world champion Tetris player play in VR mode, they actually were able to tune in and focus more than when they were playing just on the regular TV. And they attributed that to the faster frame rates and the fact that he didn't have to look at anything else and could just focus in exactly on what it was that he was playing. So that was interesting. Regardless of all of that, though, I'm still going to give it to Beat Saber. Now, we get into best action games. And the first one on the list is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. And I know there are a lot of people that love their COD. So I know a lot of people are going to be putting in their votes for COD. That's almost without a doubt. Also on the list is Dead Cells, which we mentioned earlier, has some interesting stuff and some fighting, but it's, I don't know. I don't know if it really qualifies up there with these other contenders. That said, we do have Destiny 2 Forsaken on here again, so I'm just going to say no to that one as well. And then this is where we see Far Cry 5 as a action game. And of course, then we have Mega Man 11, which also came out. Mega Man 11 is more of the same. No real changes, just some slightly more complex maps. Far Cry 5, in my opinion, I would probably give it to, just simply because of the sheer amount of stuff that you can actually do, the different types of weapons, the different types of gameplay, the story behind it, the story that you play through it. I know you guys don't really, from earlier, it didn't seem like you guys wanted Far Cry, but I kind of feel it actually deserves it for this one, out of the other nominations. Then we come to Best Action and Adventure Game, and then we have, starting off, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, followed by God of War, followed by Marvel's Spider-Man, followed by Red Dead Redemption 2, followed by Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I'm just going to go and say give this one to God of War. Sorry to say, like, that. Really? You're going to give it to Tomb Raider or Assassin's Creed? You're going to give it to Spider-Man for an action adventure game. Interesting. Why would you give? But it is action though. It's action / adventure, meaning it can be either or. Say Spider-Man action is top tier. To a degree. I mean, there's only certain things that you can do. You've got your suit actions, which are interesting. You've got your swinging, your pulling with the web, your combinations for kicking and punching, and maybe grabbing, well, swinging stuff, I should say. And aside from that, there's not too much else. The rest is like based off of like slams when you're landing and stuff like that. The real thing to it is the suits and the different gadgets that you can use, which I don't know, it makes it okay, but then when you actually fight against people, it's almost very generic in the way they fight. Sure, some do a bit more damage than the rest, some have different capabilities, like when you go against Fisk versus when you go against wow, I forget the guy who does the echo, like the sound vibrations. um but hmm, you're saying God of War got nerfed compared to 2 or 3 with the fight mechanics, dodges, and different environments. You know, you do have a point. But at the same time, I don't want. I also wonder, Spider-Man, when you compare it to the boss fights. Okay, so you've got the group fights, the boss fights. You're essentially just continuously using the same stuff. The only real differences are the boss fights and what they're doing. And then you've got God of War, which essentially you're using a lot of the same mechanics as well. Plus, sometimes if you have the gauntlet, then you can do some more stuff like a little bit of like magic type stuff, and get some boosts, that kind of thing. Uh, Plus, you have Atreus there, who sometimes shoots and sometimes helps you kill stuff. And then you've got Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is Assassin's Creed. This is, when it comes down to action, they're pretty much all fairly tied, in my opinion. When it comes down to adventure, I kind of lean more towards Assassin's Creed Odyssey or God of War. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is not on my list at all. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a possibility, but I kind of doubt it. Marvel Spider-Man is a runner-up, in my opinion, between one of these two, and I'm probably gonna have to say Assassin's Creed Odyssey is probably gonna get my bet on this one. Then it comes to best role-playing game, and then we've got Dragon Quest 11, Echoes of an Elusive Age, which, yeah. We've got Monster Hunter World, which I personally really did enjoy until they stopped developing it really and truly. But I remember playing hours for that with friends. Um, there's Ni no Kuni 2, there's Octopath, there's Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire. And yeah, like Right Pack Jakes is saying, I'm for an RPG, I'm gonna give it to Monster Hunter. Granted, it didn't have as much of an RPG feel to it as I would have liked. It still kind of does the trick for me. Then we get to best fighting game, and this is where it becomes a little harder. For the starters, we're gonna just nix off Street Fighter V. Period. We then have Blazblue Cross Tag Battle, Dragon Ball Fighter Z, and Soul Calibur 6. I am going to, how should I put this? When it comes to Blazblue, it's an interesting game and it's actually fairly well made. I won't deny that. Is it on the level of Dragon Ball Z or Soul Calibur? In my opinion, probably not. It's probably like a tier right under Tekken, in my opinion, which is on the par with Dragon Ball Z and whatnot. Soul Calibur, though, it depends on which mode you're playing on. If you're playing with custom characters, I'm going to have to say no. If you're playing with default characters, then I would say it's probably going to be between Dragon Ball Z, Fighter Z and Soul Calibur 6. The reason why I say no to the custom characters is because that creates weird hitboxes and a lot of other little weird glitchy kind of stuff inside of it. Plus, some of these characters are just plain weird. So, if I had to give it, this one's a little actually hard for me. I don't know who I'd give it to. Dragon Ball Fighter Z has great character roster. The environments, of course, in both they're kind of still panning across, which is one of the things I really like about Soul Calibur 6, and the fact that you actually have a 3D world surrounding you. So as you move around the map, you can see quite literally all around you. Plus, you have the stage, which DB Fighter Z has. But DB Fighter Z also has vertical and horizontal fighting, where Soul Calibur doesn't. So, yeah, for this one, I'm actually gonna say tie for me. I honestly don't know which one's gonna win between those two. I wouldn't expect anyone else but those two to win, though. Then we come to Best Family Game. We have Mario Tennis Ace, Nintendo Labo, Overcooked 2, Starlink Battle for Atlas, and Super Mario Party. I am going to have to immediately rule out Nintendo Labo because it's mainly built for kids, not for family. Overcooked 2 is an interesting one, but I'm also going to have to say no to this. Starlink Battle for Atlas is also kind of a meh one. It's so and so. Mario Party, I have it, but at the same point, it's also a game that you need to play with friends and family. You can't really play it by yourself. Whereas Mario Tennis, you can play it by yourself and you can play with your friends and family. So, in that regard, I would like to say tennis, but the fact that Party has so much to offer when you do have people, make it a toss up. Like White Pancakes is saying, Mario Party and tennis. So, depending on how they categorize it, it can either be tennis because that allows you to play with other people, or if you're looking more for party type stuff, then well, Mario Party is probably going to be the one that wins. So it depends on exactly how they play it. For the only example that they give is for the best game appropriate for family play, irrespective of genre or platform. So yeah, it becomes a little harder to really define. Then we have the best strategy game, which has the banner Saga 3, Battletech, Frostpunk, Into the Breach, and Valkyria Chronicles 4. I am going to actually give this one to between Valkyria Chronicles 4 and Frostpunk. The reason why I'm giving it to Frostpunk is because of the strategy behind actually how you live. Essentially what this game is all about is that you start off in a frozen place, essentially, and you have to build a city while making sure that your people don't die from the elements, from the fact that you were living in like a winter wasteland essentially, and you have to make do and you have to survive and you have to strategize for everything that's happening. And so, while I actually do like the Valkyria Chronicles series, I'm probably gonna have to give it to Frostpunk just because they did something a little different than the usual strategy game. Um, and while Valkyria has some nice stuff, like it's still more like a JPG to a role playing game to me than anything else. Than say a strategy game. Then we have best sports and slash racing game. So we've got FIFA 19, Forza Horizon 4, Mario Tennis Aces, NBA 2K 19, and Pro Evolution Soccer 2019. Now I'm gonna just throw Pro Evolution out of here from the get go. 2K was good for a while, and then, as per usual, 2K starts to fall off. I'm not going to give it that. Mario Tennis Aces just simply does not keep up with the rest. Between FIFA, I'm actually probably going to have to give it to FIFA 19. Just simply because of the hype that's always behind the FIFA games. Forza has always got a good amount of hype as well, but you have to keep in mind that soccer is quite literally, if I remember correctly, the most popular sport in the world. And yeah, I kind of feel like FIFA's going to win this one. But yeah, like White Pancakes, my top two would be FIFA and then Forza Horizon 4. Then we come to best multiplayer game, which is Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Destiny 2 Forsaken, which is already off, Fortnite, Monster Hunter World, and Sea of Thieves. I am going to say, wow, I actually don't really want to give any of these multiplayer, if that makes any sense. If anything, Sea of Thieves feels like it gives me more of a dynamic range of things I can do with other people. Monster Hunter World, I quite literally have to send up a flare to bring my friends into the game, or have randoms come in, unless I've already started off with them. And even then, like when you're back at base, the only thing you can really do with them is run around, show off your outfits, and do an arm wrestling match. That's Monster Hunter World. Fortnite, all you really have is a shooter game with 3 other people. Unless you're doing one of the really special ones that has like 25 or 50 people inside of it. But you don't know most of these people, and so it's multiplayer, it's not quite the same. Destiny 2 Forsaken, again, had so much potential, but the chances of you finding friends that are still playing it is going to be hard. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is probably second on my list, actually. I have a feeling Fortnite's going to win it, just simply because. But I would actually prefer Sea of Thieves to probably win this. Just saying. Best student game awarded to the best student project created at a high school or college level. You've got Combat 2018, Dash Quasar, Jera, Leaf, and Recharge. Honestly, I don't know anything about any of these games, so just looking at it, I'm probably going to give it to wow. Probably the Leaf, which is a France based game. Well, place. Best debut indie game, we've got Donut County, Florence, Moss, The Messenger, and Yaku's Island Express. Now, you remember Yaku's Island Express, and I actually would probably pick this one over the rest, just simply because of how, well, weird it is. It's got a nice little design to it. The actual play behind it is interesting. It's still like a little bit of a platformer, but it's fun. So I'm gonna give it to Yaku. Then we have the best esports game for the game that has delivered the best overall esports experience to players, inclusive of tournaments, community support, content updates, irrespective of the genre or platform. We've got CSGO, Dota 2, Fortnite, League of Legends, and Overwatch. Yeah, CSGO and Dota 2 have almost always had the biggest crowd when it comes to how much they've actually worked on it. League of Legends has been pretty big as well. Those I would say are the top three when it comes to esports. Fortnite as an esport is still being developed and it's not quite there. Epic Games is still working on it, and while there have been tournaments, they have not really been the best ones because all you're doing is how should I put this? Fighting randomly and then scoring to see how well you have matched up, which can be unfair because you can be placed against better players in one grouping than the other person who's in a different grouping. So it doesn't really seem fair, in my opinion. If I look at esports earnings as well, uh, the top game, let's see, is Dota 2 followed by Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So based off of that, I'm probably going to have to say Dota 2. Even though technically, League of Legends kind of came from Dota 2 anyway, and Dota 2 came from StarCraft. So yeah. Then we get into things like best esports players, best esports team, the best esports coach, best esports event, host, moments, uh, content creator of the year, stuff like that. I'm not really gonna go over those guys. I would like to say, I do want to give props to Sonic Fox and Cloud9 for stuff that they're doing. I probably think those two are going to win, but I'm not going to get into anyone else. But yeah, that is what my thoughts and some of my host thoughts and some of your thoughts as to what are going to be the game of the year for the awards. Now, whether those will actually be the case, we'll find out December 6th when the announcement actually goes live. So make sure you tune in then. And don't forget, guys, Esports Wrap is on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have another show called MOAR Tech, which is typically on Thursdays, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard as well, where we talk about technology and stuff like that. We have a returning host for the next episode, hopefully. And if you missed any part of this episode, we, of course, will have it recorded and edited and uploaded to YouTube at youtube.com/morecookies, MOAR cookies. We're going to have it on morecookies.com, MOAR cookies. We're going to have it on our podcast, which you can listen to on pretty much anywhere from Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And until next time, guys, take care.